Joined by one of the country's top agricultural economists, Professor Ashok Gulati, joins me on that food inflation issue. Mr. Gulati, Professor Gulati, retail inflation remaining high at 7.6% in August, bulk of it coming from food inflation. How worrying is it that food inflation in particular seems to be high at the moment? Should we be worried by these numbers?
Well, I would say we are still not out of the woods. We need to continue with the tightening of monetary policy, also fiscal policy, and calibrate the trade policy in a manner that can balance the interest of bringing down inflation, but also keeping the growth in the economy high.
So you're saying the RBI may have to step in a way on interest rates, but what about what is worrying is food inflation? Because that affects millions of people. Wheat stocks, Professor Gulati, plunging of FCI reportedly to a 14-year low. Concerns also being expressed over rice stocks at the moment. Do you believe this is something to be worried about at the moment, or is this only a limited impact because of the erratic rainfall this monsoon?
Well, not really very much, because if you look at the food grain stock situation, you know, October 1st, the buffer stock norm is 30.77 million tons. In September, we have about 60 million tons, almost double of what the buffer stock norm is. It may be low compared to some years, and it may be low for wheat, but rice is still bulging stocks we have. So the problem is that the buffer stock norms are calculated when the distribution was 5 kilograms per person per month under the National Food Security Act. But if you are giving double of that, that is 10 kilograms per person per month, almost free food to more than 800 million people, that is where the stocks will get depleted much faster. But I don't see, that's a policy decision the government has to take on the PM, Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, whether they want to continue with that or end it in September end.
You know, you're making an important point. You're making an important point, Professor Gulati. The centre will need to take a decision soon on whether you extend Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana beyond the 30th of September, guaranteeing free food grain to, what, 80 crore people. Do you believe our stocks are sufficient for this scheme to extend to 80 crore Indians with free food grain at the moment?
Well, if you do that, then in that case, your stocks will definitely get depleted by next year. We still have 60 million tons, as I said, despite the drop in massive drop in wheat procurement. But rice is good. What you need to also think about is how's the rainfall this monsoon. And rice area is likely to come down in Bihar, Jharkhand, Eastern UP, where the rainfall has been deficient. So it may have a little impact on the overall production of rice. So you have to anticipate 3 to 4 months in advance. You know, if you want to give free food, then of course the stocks will get depleted much faster. Otherwise, you have ample stocks to meet the Food Security Act requirements.
So that, you know, you seem to be reassuring us that there are sufficient stocks, rice and wheat. The reason I asked you also this, Professor Gulati, 4 months ago, you might recall the government banned exports of wheat following an unexpected crop failure resulting in low procurement, depletion of public stocks. Now concerns are being raised over whether curbs should be imposed on rice shipments as well. You're saying no real need for alarm. Am I correct that we have sufficient food stocks at least at the moment?
Yes, because the buffer stock norms are, and the actual stocks are almost double of the buffer stock norms. I would say instead of an abrupt ban, which was imposed in case of wheat, in case of rice, there has been a calculated action. And one thing is that on the common rice, they have put a 20% export duty, which in fact I had written in one of my pieces in Indian Express. that we have been exporting too much rice, which was 40% of the global trade, and the global prices were coming down. That means the marginal revenue was coming down and you had to export more and more quantity to get the same dollar. So the optimal trade theory says that we have done some calculation that not more than 12 million tons of rice should be exported, otherwise the global prices will be plunging down to our prices. So we will not benefit from that. So from that point of view, I think whatever policy action has been taken on rice is much more calculated, and perhaps also to recover the huge fertilizer subsidy and power subsidy that goes into rice. So it's an attempt to also recover some of that.
So let me ask you in conclusion, Professor Gulati, do you believe in the next 3 months food inflation in particular will taper down? As I said, we've had an erratic rainfall this year. Some parts of the country, including in some of our agriculture growing areas, the uncertainty over Kharif crop this time. Do you believe that food inflation will eventually taper off in the next 3 months, or will it continue to remain worryingly high?
I would say don't expect a dramatic decline, but it will hover around this 6 to 8% range. That's what my forecast would be, more or less in this. As you rightly said, there are downside risks because the monsoon has not been very evenly distributed. But having said that, think about what is happening in many other countries of CPI. Look at Turkey at 80% inflation. Look at Pakistan, Sri Lanka, even Europe or US. So yes, we have not been able to meet 6% upper band. But when you look across the world, especially your peers in US or Europe or other developing countries, I think we have done fairly well, but we can still do better.
Professor Gulati, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Of course, in the Indian context, food inflation accounts for a much larger proportion of our overall inflationary basket. But as always, good to get an expert to give us a sense of where food inflation is going.